The first time I saw Elara, the world didn't stop. It narrowed. It funneled down to the space between her shoulder and the curve of her neck as she tilted her head back to laugh at something a colleague said. I was just the new hire, the kid fetching coffee for the senior archivists. But in that moment, I was a cartographer, mapping the fine, almost invisible lines that feathered from the corner of her eye. She was in her mid-40s, all quiet grace and worn-out cardigans that seemed to hold the scent of old paper and lavender. I was 24, all clumsy limbs and a voice that still cracked when I was nervous. Our worlds weren't supposed to touch. It happened in the silence of the rare manuscripts room, under the soft, honeyed glow of a single desk lamp. The main lights were off, the rest of the library sleeping. We were the only two souls left, cross-referencing a collection of 18th-century botanical sketches. Her presence was a physical thing, a shift in the air pressure, a warmth that reached me from 3 feet away. "Could you hold this corner?" she asked, her voice a low hum that vibrated in the quiet space between us. My hand trembled as I pressed the fragile parchment flat. Her fingers, cool and sure, came to steady the opposite edge. Our pinkies didn't quite touch, but the space between them crackled. I could feel the phantom weight of her skin against mine. She was looking at the drawing, a detailed study of a night blooming cereus, but I was looking at her hand, at the silver band she wore on her index finger, at the faint blue veins tracing a path beneath her skin. She must have felt my stare. Her eyes lifted, met mine. They were the color of sea-worn glass, and in the lamplight, they held a depth that made my breath catch. It was too long, that look. It stretched beyond professional courtesy into something else, something charged and unspoken. A tiny muscle flickered in her jaw. We both looked away when I smiled. A reflexive, nervous gesture, but not for the same reason. My smile was an apology for staring, a clumsy offering of my sudden, overwhelming awareness of her. I looked away out of a shameful, youthful fear that she'd see the sheer, stupid scale of my attraction. She looked away, I think, because she'd seen it, and for a fractured second, something in her gaze had answered. An awkward silence descended, thick and heavy as velvet. The only sound was the whisper of the climate control. My coffee, long forgotten, was a cold, bitter sludge in the cup next to me. The dim light seemed to press in closer, making the room feel smaller, more intimate. She cleared her throat, a soft, rough sound. "It's getting late," she said, her gaze fixed firmly on the drawing, her fingers finally retreating from the edge of the parchment, leaving my skin feeling suddenly, profoundly cold. And then the door to the manuscript room clicked open, a sharp, intrusive sound in the quiet. A shaft of harsh fluorescent light from the hallway cut across the floor, and a security guard's voice called out, "Everything all right in here?" Motion sensors are still tripping. We both froze, caught in the act of a crime we hadn't committed. Her eyes found mine again, wide and startled, a silent question hanging in the air between us. The guard's interruption became the new, unspoken rule between us. We never mentioned that night in the manuscript room, but it lived in the spaces between our words. I learned her name was Elara Vance. She'd been a rising star in art history once, a decade ago, before a messy divorce and a retreat into the safety of archives. I pieced this together from office whispers, from the way she'd sometimes stare at a painting of a stormy sea with a hollowed-out look. Her confidence was a shield, and I was starting to see the hairline fractures. My attraction felt like a dangerous, stupid flame. It wasn't just the 15 years between us. It was the sheer audacity of it. She was a tenured curator. I was a temp. She had a history written in the lines on her face. Mine was still a blank page. The risk wasn't in someone finding out, but in her seeing the full, clumsy depth of it and pitying me. I started noticing everything, cataloging it like the artifacts we handled. The way she'd tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear, the silver streak at her temple a perfect, natural highlight, the faint scent of her lavender hand cream when she reached for a book next to me. I tried to hide my observations behind a mask of professional diligence, but my eyes betrayed me. She, in turn, began a dance of approach and retreat. She'd lean over my shoulder to point out a detail in a manuscript, her breath a warm, soft brush against my neck that made my skin prickle. Then, as if startled by her own boldness, she'd straighten up, putting a full 2 feet of professional distance between us, her voice turning crisp and formal. One afternoon, we were in the staff kitchen, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I was struggling to open a stubborn jar of pickles for a department lunch. "Here, let me," she said, her voice soft beside me. Before I could protest, her hand covered mine on the lid. Her skin was cool, her grip surprisingly firm. For a second, it was just our hands, locked together on that glass jar. I could feel the fine bones of her wrist, the steady pressure of her palm. My heart hammered against my ribs. The lid gave way with a soft pop. She didn't let go immediately. Our eyes met over the open jar, the air thick with the sharp, vinegary scent. Her gaze dropped to our still-connected hands, and a faint flush crept up her neck. It was the first time I'd seen her flustered. It was the most intimate thing I'd ever witnessed. She pulled her hand back as if burned, curling her fingers into her palm. "There you go," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway, her back to me. The silence stretched, electric and heavy. She didn't look back, but the pause was a confession in itself. Then, she was gone, leaving me standing there, the phantom warmth of her hand seared into mine. The unspoken bond between us now as tangible as the jar in my grip. The jar incident became a live wire in the dark. We moved around each other with a new, painful awareness. Every casual brush in the hallway felt deliberate. Every shared glance in a meeting was a secret. The near discovery happened on a rainy Thursday. We were in the climate-controlled vault, the hum of the machinery a constant drone. Elara was showing me how to properly handle a fragile, hand-stitched journal. She stood close, her back almost to my front, her hands guiding mine over the brittle paper. "You have to feel its weight," she whispered, her voice low and intimate in the sterile quiet. "Support it, don't just hold it." Her hair was close enough to smell. My breath hitched. I was hyper-aware of the heat of her body, the way her shoulder pressed lightly against my chest. My hands under hers were trembling. "Like this," I murmured, my voice rough. She turned her head slightly, her profile inches from my face. Her eyes were dark, her lips parted. The air vanished from the room. It was just us, the hum, and the pounding of my heart. I leaned in just a fraction. An unspoken question. The vault door hissed open. We sprang apart as if electrocuted. David, the head archivist, stood there, his glasses fogged from the humidity. "There you are, Elara. The board is waiting for your presentation." Elara's face was a mask of professional calm, but a telltale flush painted her neck. Of course, I lost track of time. David's gaze flicked to me, then back to her. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Just training." After he left, the silence was suffocating. The guilt was a physical weight on my chest. I had almost ruined everything for her, her reputation, her career. She wouldn't look at me. That was... I started, but had no words. "A mistake," she finished, her voice tight. She hugged her arms around herself. It's impossible. You see that, don't you? The talk, the everything." "I see you," I said, the words out before I could stop them. "That's all I see." Her composure cracked. She looked at me then, truly looked, and her eyes were full of a war I desperately wanted to understand. Fear, longing, and a deep, resonant shame. She took a step back, toward the door, then another, but her eyes never left mine. The space between us was a chasm and a bridge. She was trying to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot, pulled by the same force that held me captive. We were caught in the terrible, beautiful gravity of almost, and neither of us knew how to escape. The avoidance that followed was a special kind of torture. For 3 days we were ghosts in the same building, leaving rooms as the other entered, our emails strictly professional. The shame I felt was a cold stone in my gut. I'd seen the fear in her eyes, The I ruined it staring back at me, and I knew it was my fault for pushing. The breaking point came in the stacks, in the oldest, most silent part of the library. I was perched on a rolling ladder, reshelving heavy art folios. The air was thick with the scent of aging leather and dust. I heard her footsteps before I saw her, a familiar, hesitant rhythm. She stopped at the base of the ladder, her head bowed. "We need to talk," she said, her voice echoing softly in the narrow aisle. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just climbed down, the rungs groaning under my weight. When I stood before her, the space between us was electric, charged with everything unsaid. "This has to stop," she whispered, but she was looking at my mouth. "What has to stop?" My voice was low, rough. "We haven't even started anything." "You know what?" She hugged herself, a defensive gesture that made her look younger, more vulnerable. The looks, the tension. "It's inappropriate." "I'm inappropriate." "Why?" The word was a challenge. I took a half step closer. Her breath hitched. "Because of what people might think? Or because of what you feel?" She shook her head, but didn't deny it. A strand of that silver-streaked hair fell across her face. The impulse was stronger than reason. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and gently brushed it back, tucking it behind her ear. My knuckles grazed the soft skin of her temple. She flinched but didn't pull away. A tiny, choked sound escaped her throat. Her eyes were wide, terrified, and full of a longing so deep it mirrored my own. The air left the room. The world shrank to the point where my skin touched hers. She was leaning into my touch, her body a silent confession. I could feel the warmth of her, smell the faint lavender on her skin. My other hand found her waist, pulling her the last few inches until she was against me. She was solid and real and trembling. "Elara," I breathed, my lips inches from hers. This was it, the line we couldn't uncross. Her eyes fluttered closed, her lips parting in a silent surrender. I leaned in, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, the world tilting on its axis. The sound of her phone vibrating on the stone floor between us was like a gunshot. The phone buzzed, a frantic, angry insect on the stone floor. The spell shattered. Elara jerked back as if scalded, her hand flying to her lips. Her eyes, wide with a fresh kind of horror, darted from me to the screen, lighting up with a name I couldn't see. "I have to take this," she whispered, her voice ragged. She snatched the phone and fled down the aisle, her footsteps echoing a frantic retreat. I slumped against the cold metal shelves, the ghost of her warmth still searing my palm. I had been a breath away, a single, stupid breath. I found her 20 minutes later, not in her office, but on the fire escape. The city sprawled out below her in the twilight. She was hugging herself against the chill, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face. She didn't turn as I approached. "It was my ex-husband," she said, her voice flat, stripped of all its usual music. "He's getting remarried." He called to share the good news. I didn't know what to say. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. "He left me," she continued, as if confessing to the skyline, "because he said I had become a ghost, that I lived in the past, surrounded by dead things, that there was no passion left in me." She finally turned to look at me, and the raw shame in her eyes was a physical blow. And here I am, a cliché, the desperate, middle-aged woman preying on a boy young enough to be. "Don't," I cut in, my own voice sharp, "don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't use his words against yourself. Or against me." She flinched. The truth was out now, hanging between us. This wasn't just about an age gap. It was about her fear that he was right, that she was broken, and that whatever this was between us was just a symptom of that brokenness. "What are we doing then?" she asked, a desperate plea in her eyes. I moved then, closing the distance between us. I didn't kiss her. I didn't touch her. I just stood there, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body, could see the pulse fluttering at the base of her throat. "We're not praying," I said, my voice low and fierce. "And we're not a cliché. We're just two people. That's all." Her gaze searched mine, looking for the lie, finding only a terrifying sincerity. The attraction and fear warred in her expression. A beautiful, devastating collision. She was trembling. She lifted a hand, her fingers hovering near my chest, not quite touching. A decision hung in the balance. Then, her fingers brushed against the fabric of my shirt. A touch so light it was almost imagined. "My place," she whispered, the words a surrender to the inevitable. "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. The walk to her apartment felt like the longest and shortest journey of my life. The city lights blurred around me. I stood outside her building, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and for a terrifying moment, I was convinced I had the wrong address, the wrong night, the wrong life. She opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans, her feet bare. The vulnerability of it stole my breath. Her apartment was warm, smelling of books and the faint, lingering trace of her lavender. It was nothing like the sterile museum. This was her unmasked. We stood in the living room, the space between us charged with a silence louder than any words. "I almost didn't come," I admitted, the confession torn from me. "I almost didn't answer the door," she whispered back. There were no more excuses, no interruptions, no professional walls to hide behind. It was just us, and the terrifying truth of what we wanted. She took a step forward, then another, until we were close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body, could see the flecks of gold in her sea-glass eyes. "This is a bad idea," she said, but her voice was soft, her gaze dropping to my lips. "I know." My hand came up to cradle her jaw, my thumb stroking the soft skin of her cheek. A shuddering breath escaped her, and she leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. This was the choice, this single, quiet surrender. I bent my head, my forehead resting against hers. Our breaths mingled, warm and quick. "Tell me to leave," I murmured, my voice rough with want. "And I will. I'll walk away and never look back." She was silent for a long moment, her hands coming up to rest tentatively on my chest. I could feel her heart hammering against my own. "Don't," she breathed, the word a final, broken whisper. "Don't go." That was all it took. My lips found hers. It wasn't a frantic, desperate collision, but a slow, profound discovery. A question asked and answered. Her mouth was soft and sure beneath mine, her hands sliding up to clutch at my shoulders, pulling me closer as if I were the only solid thing in a spinning world. It was a kiss full of 15 years of her silence and 2 years of my quiet longing. It was messy, and a little clumsy, and utterly, devastatingly real. When we finally broke apart, breathing ragged, we didn't speak. We just looked at each other in the dim light of her apartment, the understanding passing between us as clear as day. The fear was still there. The complications hadn't vanished, but the pretense was gone. We had chosen each other against all reason. There was no going back. The fear didn't vanish with the dawn. It sat with us at her small kitchen table, over coffee that grew cold. We were two strangers who knew each other intimately, navigating the quiet wreckage of our own brave new world. "People will talk," she said, not looking at me, her finger tracing the rim of her mug. "Let them," I replied, my voice still rough with sleep and wonder. She finally met my gaze. "It's not that simple. For you, your career is just starting. This could complicate things." "You're not a complication, Elara. You're the point." It was the truest thing I'd ever said. The age gap, the whispers, they were just static. The signal was the way her hand found mine across the table, her fingers lacing through mine with a quiet certainty that felt older than both of us. It was the way she didn't flinch when I lifted her knuckles to my lips, pressing a kiss there that was a promise, not a demand. We spent the day in the quiet sanctuary of her apartment, not talking much, just being. I read on her couch while she graded papers, our legs tangled together. The silence was no longer awkward or charged. It was comfortable, a shared language. In the afternoon light, I saw the fine lines around her eyes not as marks of age, but as a map of a life lived, a history I desperately wanted to learn. As evening fell, She stood before the window, watching the city lights begin to glitter. I came up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist, resting my chin on her shoulder. She leaned back into me with a soft sigh, her body molding against mine as if it belonged there. "I was so afraid," she whispered, her hands covering mine. "I know. I'm still a little afraid. So am I." We stood like that for a long time, watching the day end. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic promises. There was just this. The solid warmth of her in my arms, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the feeling of having arrived somewhere I didn't know I was trying to get to. The story wasn't about a beginning or an end, but a continuation. It was in the gentle pressure of my forehead against her temple, in the way her hand squeezed mine, in the unspoken understanding that whatever came next, we would face it from here, together. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?